The boy in the green tunic was bleeding under the pulpit when junior guardswoman Bryn Marrow stepped between him and the 4 men who had put him there, and the old captain who told this story 60 years later always began it exactly that way, because that was the moment she had stopped being the first woman in the Royal Guard of Aelmere and started being a guard. He told it on the long porch of the veterans' house at Windfast. He was 81. He had served 43 years in the personal guard. He had taken his oath at 16, with her gloved hand on his shoulder, and he had carried her brace of small silver chevrons in his coat pocket since the morning she had given them to him, and told him, in that low, even voice she never raised, that he was the only one she had trained, whom she trusted to remember her honestly. So he remembered her honestly. He did not remember her tall, because she had not been. He did not remember her brave, because brave was the wrong word, and she had hated it. He remembered her as she had been the autumn afternoon in the great chapel of Aelmere, when 4 men in steward's coats had cornered the bishop's young secretary by the south pulpit. She had been 23. On her shoulder there had been no braid yet, because no one had yet decided whether a woman could wear one. She had been on her 4th day of independent watch. 4 days. The Crown's personal guard had admitted her in the spring, after 11 months of argument in the inner council, and one quiet morning when the old king had set his cup down and said, "In front of 3 lords and 2 field marshals, the daughter of Marrow of Carrowfield rides better, shoots better, and holds her tongue better than any boy you have sent me in 2 years, gentlemen, and I am tired of this conversation." He had signed her commission with his own pen. The argument had not stopped. It had only gone underground. For 4 months she had drilled with the company and slept in the attic room above the saddlers, because the barracks had not been prepared to receive her, and no one had been in a hurry to prepare them. The senior sergeant, a square man named Old Doss, who had never in 20 years been asked to instruct a woman, had taken one long look at her on her first morning and said, "Marrow, I have been told to teach you. I have not been told to like it. We will agree on the first part, and not concern ourselves with the second." She had agreed. She had outlasted 3 first-year recruits by midsummer and matched the rest by harvest. Old Doss, by the 4th month, had begun, without fanfare, to give her the harder of the 2 drills when the pair came down to a coin toss. On her 90th day she had been called before the captain general, a long grey man named Wren Halvers. He had looked at her a long minute. Then, "Guardswoman Marrow, your standing watch begins in the morning. South liturgy in the great chapel for a month, then the king's audience corridor. You will be the only personal guard in the chapel at any one time. Do you understand what I am telling you?" She had said she did. He had nodded once. What he had been telling her, the old captain said, was that the council had agreed she could wear the cord only if her first month of public watch did not occasion a single incident, and that if an incident occurred, she would be the only personal guard in the room when it did. The council had been pleased with the elegance of this arrangement. The captain general had not. The great chapel of Aelmere was the old kind pale stone, 3 pulpits, the high vault, the long bone-cold nave, the bishop's clerks crossed in pairs. On the 4th afternoon of her watch, with the chapel empty between services and the western light falling sideways across the floor, Bryn Marrow heard the wrong kind of sound from the south pulpit, and was moving before she had identified it. A scuffle, a boy's voice, cut off, the dull soft sound of a body going against wood. She came around the corner of the chancel at a fast walk, not a run, because running drew the eye, and a guard did not draw the eye unless she meant to. Right hand on the hilt of her short sword, left hand free. She had counted, before she saw them, the 4 sets of boots on the stone, the absence of any other guard, and the south door standing open behind them, which it was not supposed to be. 4 men in the deep blue of the Lord Chamberlain's household. Correct livery, incorrect place. Chamberlain's stewards did not enter the south chapel without a writ, and the writ was filed at the gate, and she had been at the gate that morning. There had been no writ. The boy on the floor was the bishop's young secretary, 16, narrow-faced. They had pinned him against the base of the pulpit. 2 held his arms. The 3rd was going through the satchel they had cut from his shoulder. The 4th was a tall man with a quiet face who was watching the door. The quiet man saw her first. He did not start. He nodded to the 3rd, who closed the satchel and stood. The 2 who had the boy did not let him go. "Guardswoman," he said politely, "there has been a misunderstanding. We have authority. You may withdraw." Bryn did not withdraw. "Show me your writ," she said, "and release the boy." The quiet man smiled with one side of his mouth. "We are here on Lord Chamberlain's business. The Chamberlain need not file a writ to recover a stolen item from a clerk's satchel. He does in the south chapel. Show me your writ. Release the boy." The 2 men holding the secretary did not move. The boy had stopped struggling. There was blood at his lip, and his eyes had gone to her the way the eyes of a drowning man go to a rope. The quiet man took one slow step toward her. He was a head taller. He had the easy weight of a man who had handled a blade many years. "There is one of you," he said gently, "and 4 of us. You are very new to your post. Lower your hand from your sword and walk back to your station, and I will not need to mention this to the Captain General." Bryn looked very steadily at him. "There is one of me, and 4 of you, and a chapel bell 3 steps to my right that I can reach before any of you can cross this floor. The bell brings the watch in under a minute. That will be very inconvenient to a misunderstanding. Show me your writ. Release the boy." The quiet man's face did not change. The man with the satchel shifted his weight an inch. "You have made an error, guardswoman. I have made a choice. They are different things. Show me your writ. Release the boy." The quiet man's hand went to his belt, slow, deliberate, the movement of a man who wanted her to flinch. She did not. She had been trained out of flinching by a sergeant who had stood in front of her on the 3rd week with a saber and made her count to 10 without moving her eyes from the point. She counted to 4 now. On 4, she did 3 things in the space of 1 breath. She drew. She rang the chapel bell, which was a brass cord at the height of her left shoulder, with the gloved knuckles of her free hand, and she stepped, not back, but sideways, putting the heavy oak corner of the lectern at her right elbow and the open south door in the corner of her eye. The bell, struck once, was very loud in the empty chapel. The quiet man went very still. "Now," Bryn said, "you have a choice as well. The watch is on the stair. If you are out of this chapel before they reach the door, you will be men who were not here. If you are still here when they arrive, you will be men who were here." The 2 holding the boy let him go. He sat down hard on the stone and put his hands over his face. The man with the satchel did not put it down. The quiet man took 1 half-step backward, his hand still at his belt. "Marrow," he said, as if remembering the name. "Of Carrowfield, the 1st. "Out," Bryn said. He went. They all went. The south door clapped shut behind them, and 4 sets of boots went down the south stair very fast and then very controlled, and the chapel was empty again except for the boy on the floor and Bryn standing with her drawn sword between the boy and the door, the bell cord still swinging at her shoulder. She did not lower the sword until the boots of the watch came up the north stair, until old Doss himself, who had been across the courtyard and heard the bell, was inside the chapel with his own blade out and 3 men behind him. He looked at the boy. He looked at the bell cord. He looked at the open south door and the 4 pairs of boot prints in the dust along the pew. He looked, last, at Bryn. "Report. 4 men in Chamberlain's livery. No writ. Attempting to recover a satchel from the bishop's secretary by force. I held the door, struck the bell, ordered them out. They left. Discharge your weapon. No, sergeant. Take a wound. No. Give a name. They gave mine." Old Doss looked at the boy on the floor. "Lad, stand up. Sit on that bench and do not move. Marrow, with me." She went with him to the north stair. He stopped on the landing where the candle nook screened them from the chapel below. He did not raise his voice. He had never raised his voice. "You did not run." "No, sergeant." "You did not draw before you spoke." "No, sergeant." "You rang the bell with your offhand." "Yes, sergeant." He was silent for a long count. The old captain on the porch said what came out of his mouth then was the only direct praise old Doss ever gave to anyone in his hearing. "You did the job, Marrow. That will be inconvenient to a great many people. Go to your post." She went. The inquiry lasted 4 days. The Lord Chamberlain denied everything. The 4 men were never identified. The livery was claimed to be borrowed. The satchel was found with 2 letters in it that the inner council read in a small room and did not speak of afterward. The Lord Chamberlain resigned his seat within the month, on grounds of failing health, and died 8 years later in his bed. None of that, the old captain said, was the point. The point was the morning after, when Guardswoman Marrow came on watch at the audience corridor at 6 bells, and found the brace of small silver chevrons of a senior personal guard already pinned to her shoulder by someone who had not waited for the council. She had stood the whole watch with them on, and at the end of it had walked to the Captain General's office and asked, in the same low, even voice, by whose authority she was wearing rank she had not been formally raised to. Renhalvers had looked up from his desk and said, "By mine, Marrow. The council will be informed in the afternoon," and he had gone back to his papers. The council had been informed. The council had been displeased. The council had not removed the chevrons. By the spring, The cord on her shoulder had been a captain's. By the year after that, there had been 3 other women in the company. And by the time the old captain on the windfast porch had taken his oath with her gloved hand on his shoulder, there had been 40. He told the next part more slowly. He had served under her 9 years, the last 4 at her right shoulder, in the days when she had been senior captain of the king's personal guard. She had walked into a foreign embassy once and ended a long, delicate quarrel with a single sentence whose wording was still taught to junior officers. He had been at her side the night she had taken an arrow in her thigh, shielding the king's youngest daughter on a forest road, and the morning she had limped, 2 months later, to the dais where the king had laid his hand on her shoulder and named her, in front of the whole court, the truest blade this house has held in 30 years. She had bowed. She had not spoken. The old captain said that when she straightened, she had looked, briefly, at the south door of the great hall, the door of the old great chapel, 2 corridors away, and her eyes had stopped on it for one breath. Then she had returned to her post. He had asked her once whether she had been remembering the boy in the green tunic. She had not answered. She had only said, "They were always going to give me the cord, lad." The question was whether I had earned it before they did. I needed to know that. The chapel told me. She had died in a farmhouse in Carrowfield, in her sleep, in her 68th year. The cord had been laid across her coffin. The company had stood the long vigil through the night, and at sunrise the bugles had played the salute. The personal guard played for one of its own, which until then had been played for no woman in the realm, and had been played in the 60 years since for 47. That was the story, the old captain said, and the listening guardsman, 22, on his 2nd year of independent watch, sent up to Windfast to take the old man's recollections for the regimental history, closed his small leather book and did not, for a moment, write anything. "Sir," he said, "the part where she said, 'Times I held the door, struck the bell, ordered them out,' that is what she said to the sergeant? Word for word, I asked her once." "Why?" The old captain looked out across the porch at the western sky over the orchard. "Because she had decided, lad, at some point on her 90th day or her 4th, that if she was the first of us and the only one in the room when it happened, she would speak about it afterward, exactly the way a guard speaks. No more, no less. She would not make a story of it. She would file a report. The story was other people's to make." He paused. "We are taught now to do that. We are not taught that a woman on her 4th day on the floor, in front of 4 men with knives, invented times that habit for us out of nothing." He looked at the young guardsman properly. There were no women in the company before her. There was no rule for how she was to be. She made the rule by being it. Do the job. File the report. Let the cord come when it comes. We have all worn the cord because of that rule. You are wearing it now. The young guardsman looked down at his own shoulder. "Yes, sir. Write that down. And when you are 81, lad, and someone comes to take your recollections, tell it the way I told it to you. Begin with the boy in the green tunic under the pulpit. Do not begin with her name. Her name will be in the books. The boy will not." The young guardsman wrote that down. The orchard was going gold at the edges. The old captain put his hand inside his coat and brought out the brace of small silver chevrons. They were dim now. He set them on the rail of the porch between them. "She gave me these the morning she retired. Said the only one she trusted to remember her honestly. I have tried." He looked at the chevrons. "When I am gone, lad, see that they go back to the company. They do not belong to me. They belong to her. They belong to the cord." "Yes, sir." He stood with effort. The young guardsman stood quickly to give him an arm, and the old captain took it the way a man takes the arm of a guardsman he has trained. They walked together off the porch toward the dining hall. On the rail of the porch, in the long late light, the small silver chevrons lay where she had pinned them, 60 years before, to the shoulder of a junior guardswoman on her 4th day of independent watch, who had stood between a bleeding boy and 4 armed men, and who had earned, by the time the door closed behind those men, the rank she had not yet been raised to, the cord she had not yet been given, and the long, quiet, hard-won name she would carry the rest of her life. The first of them, the one who had made the rule, the one who had filed a clean report. A guard,